Today on Locked On Penguins, it's Penguins Blackhawks round 2. The Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins made some signings, and despite missing the playoffs for the third straight year, there are still plenty of positives to glean from the 2024-25 Pittsburgh Penguins season. Hunter and I are going to talk about all that and more right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Damp. You can follow me across all social media platforms at synonym for wet. Joined as always by the one and only Hunter Hodes. You can follow him on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can give our show's Twitter a follow at LO_Penguins. And of course, we appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. Don't forget that we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube and the Roku channel. And if you follow us on YouTube, don't forget to hit the notification button. That way you can be among the first to know when we drop our daily Monday through Friday episodes. Before we jump in, this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money and use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Here we are again, just a couple days removed. We are going to get Penguins versus Blackhawks round 2. We recapped the game on our Monday episode after a disappointing 3-1 loss to the Chicago Blackhawks at the United Center. That loss officially taking the Penguins out of the 2025 playoff contention window. So this is, for all intents and purposes, a meaningless game for both squads. Penguins now officially not in the playoffs. Blackhawks never were in the playoffs, and they are out as well. They are a bottom of the barrel rebuilding team. The Penguins are a team in transition. They are trying to do a rebuild, retool on the fly. Obviously, they've still got some great players, as we know. The Blackhawks really kind of have Connor Bedard, Spencer Knight, and that's really it. So we go into this game. Obviously, the Penguins probably feeling a little bit stung after a very emotional, very motivating win on Saturday against the Dallas Stars, only to follow up with that loss to the Blackhawks on Sunday. So essentially, it's a home and home. The Penguins are returning home for one of their 4 remaining games. 3 of those 4 remaining games are at PPG Paints Arena, including this one. So really nothing to play for here other than a little bit of pride and giving your fans a little bit of a show. So, Hunter, what are we looking for out of tonight's game?
Well, the other thing that they're playing for is the pick for this year. Right now, Pat, if you look at the lottery standings, which we kind of have to at least a little bit, the Penguins are officially eliminated from the playoff contention. Pat, right now, they have the 6 best lottery odds right now. So it's San Jose, Chicago, Nashville, Boston, Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh. And you look also, Pat, the Rangers with that pick, number 11, they will have an opportunity to decide, do they want to send in almost top 10 pick to the Penguins this year, or do they want to send next year's unprotected pick? Like, that's more of a discussion that we're going to have once these next 9 days go by, because the Rangers, Pat, they're cooked. Like, they got booed off the ice last night. Pierre Laviolette kind of said, yeah, I don't go in the locker room after games, which is a wild quote. Dude is just asking to get fired, by the way. So the Rangers are going to have to make a pretty big decision about that pick before the draft. But right now, you look at the lottery odds, Penguins number 6 right now. But again, we have to see how the actual lottery goes once it happens in a little over a month. But for tonight's game, I, again, still want to see a response. I felt the Penguins really didn't have much left in the tank after that nice 5-3 win over the Dallas Stars. They played like it. They played at least to a push in the first couple of periods, and then Chicago kind of took over in the third period. The Blackhawks are kind of a weird kryptonite to the Penguins. The Penguins have struggled against them a lot throughout Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin's tenure. Obviously, some of that is because prime Jonathan Toews was very tough going up against Patrick Kane and Duncan Keith and all that. But even since those guys left, Pat, these games are still tough. You know, some of those younger, faster teams, even though they're not that good, they still give the Penguins some fits. You saw that on display on Sunday when, you know, a couple of bad pinches lead to some goals against, especially the first one shorthanded. Erik Karlsson makes a hope play trying to pinch on the power play. Letang doesn't cover his man right on the odd man rush, and it leads to a goal against Connor Timmins a bit later. Caught flat-footed, as he was honestly flat-footed for a majority of that game. Puck's also in the back of the net there before Rickard Rakell was able to make it a game again before the Blackhawks got the empty netter. But still, Penguins have lost 2 of their last 3 and 3 of their last 4 to Chicago going back these last couple of seasons, even though the Blackhawks have been one of the worst teams in hockey. So for me, seeing that response, seeing that heart, I think Sidney Crosby is going to play a lot better tonight. He had a little bit of an off game on Sunday, and that's fine, people. Again, he had 11 goals and 20 points in his last 12 games before that game. I think he's going to play well. So I expect a response from him. As of right now, Pat, I don't know which goalie is going to start. That's probably going to get announced at some point during this recording. We'll have that breaking news if we get it during this. But again, biggest thing for me, making sure that you are playing smart, because I didn't feel like they were playing smart hockey on Sunday. I felt like they were just kind of going through the motions, especially on the power play late in the second period. And even though the Blackhawks are the second worst team in the league, when you look at points, teams like that can still make you pay. And they're still going to play their butts off every single night, even though they're not very good. So give me a response, give me a Sid bounce back game, and give me some pride. Your season's over, but still go out there and at least play your tail off.
For sure. I think obviously with only 4 games to go, it's a little bit different. When you get to this point of the season, you got 4 games left. Opinions and evaluations are pretty much locked in at this point, but you can still send a little bit of a message if you're an individual player. You can show that you are part of this team's long-term future, or you're worthy for a team that may need to make a signing this summer to take a chance on you if you're a pending UFA. And I think a lot of players need to play that way. I think there needs to be a little bit of, like you said, pride. It has to be, hey, yeah, this team is not making the playoffs. This is going to be the 3rd straight year Pittsburgh misses the dance, but I'm a player that either the Penguins can count on over the next couple of seasons as they try to get themselves back into the playoff picture, or I'm a player that some general manager of 31 other teams might want to offer a contract to. Now, that's a lot easier said than done. You've got 4 games left. You have 2 of those 4. One is tonight against Chicago, another team that is not making the playoffs. Then this weekend, you've got the Bruins, another team that is also out of the playoffs and sliding really fast. And then you've got New Jersey, who's going to make the playoffs. But again, we talked about them yesterday. It's a shame that they have really not been able to stay healthy. So we'll see what happens with them in the playoffs. And then you finish the season with the rival Washington Capitals, who have been just the toast of the league, and rightfully so, because of having, on top of a great season as a team, Alex Ovechkin breaks the record. So it's a lot easier said than done, because really you look at all 4 games and they really don't make much of a difference for anybody involved. Maybe the Devils can solidify themselves a little bit, but then Chicago, they're still rebuilding. Boston's sliding, and Washington is as locked in as it can get for the postseason. So,
and the Capitals might rest some guys for that game.
Right. You beat me to that point.
Right.
When you get to next week, there's a very real chance that it's the baby Penguins versus the Hershey Bears at PPG Paints Arena, with a couple big names sprinkled in here and there, because the Caps are going to the playoffs. They've got their sights set on a championship. The Penguins, they just want to get out of that game and get to the golf course. So for tonight, I would like to see, this is my main thing. And I think we're going to see this because we've kind of started to see it over the past few games. I want to see the young kids play. I want to see McGroarty. I want to see Koivunen. I want to see everybody else involved. Really, I don't want to say totally putting the saddle on them and making them the focal point. Obviously, you're still going to have Sid, Rust, Raquel, Carlson, Letang, but I do want to see these 2 continue to be put in prominent positions, whether it's McGroarty on the second power play unit or the penalty kill, Koivunen on the first power play unit. In big moments, I want to see these guys deployed. I want to see them get the lion's share of the minutes, because at this point, they've proven to you that they look like they can hang. Yeah. Now, with 4 games left before they go back to help the baby Penguins in the Calder Cup playoffs, let's see how much they can hang down these last 4 games.
100%. And they're going to keep throwing them to the Wolves in this game. You have no choice. They've more than answered the call so far since coming up. I think McGroarty has been great on Crosby's line. I think Koivu has been really good also in a top 6 role. I think he and Evgeny Malkin also have really good chemistry together. It also looks like that Kolya Chanuk is going to be coming in tonight for Ryan Shea. He was on the third pairing with Ryan Graves today. Other 2 pairings stayed the same. Connor Timmins with Erik Karlsson, and then Matt Grzelcyk with Chris Letang. I would look to change up those top 2 pairings. Grzelcyk and Letang do not work together. They have not worked together all season, and that's not going to change now in the final 4 games of the season. And one more thing, I do want to see a response from Erik Karlsson. I think these last 3 games especially have been really poor from him. He's made too many boneheaded mistakes. I need to see a response from him. I know these games are meaningless now, but I still want to see him get back to the level that we've seen him play at for at least a decent chunk of this season, because these last couple of games hasn't been good.
No, it has not been a very good performance, I guess is the easiest way to put it, for Erik Karlsson. And we'll obviously have a full off season to talk about this, but after the way he performed at 4 Nations, he suddenly became a little bit more palatable to other general managers, and you don't want to decrease your own stock in that way, because even though he says he likes it here, I do think he is somebody who is still chasing that elusive first Stanley Cup. And if you can find a taker for him this offseason, helps your cap situation and helps it fits into what Dubas likes to do with a lot of players. He likes to do right by his guys. And if he can find a way to get Karlsson to a team with a legit chance to win a Stanley Cup in the next year or 2, I think he does it. So has to be a response.
I'm just letting you know, I don't know who's going to drive the offense from the back end if he gets moved. Like, I think it makes sense to move him just because of where they are as a team, and you're going to see a lot of rumors, and because it's big cap hit and all that stuff. I don't know who's going to drive that offense, though. Letang can't do it anymore. Connor Timmins can't do it. Owen Pickering I like, but he's not a top pairing guy. Harrison Brunig, I don't think is going to be that guy yet. They'll have to bring in someone, because that's a lot of offense to replace from the back end. I know, again, I get it, man. He hasn't been as good as some people thought he was going to be. I get some of the gripes, but if he gets traded, and there's a decent chance that does happen, I think, when there's not as much offense from the back end, don't say I didn't tell you.
And whether Hunter meant to do it or not, that is actually a little bit of a tease to our final segment, which we will talk about some milestones, some highlights from this year, and just maybe a quick theory or 2 about the next couple seasons ahead. But that is much later in the show. That is going to do it for our first segment. When we come back, the Baby Penguins announced a couple of collegiate free agent signings. Hunter and I are going to talk about those when we come back. So stick with us. We'll have much more on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. But first, we've got to tell you about today's first sponsor, and that is Monarch Money. If you've ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money, it's not just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. The all-in-one convenience is absolutely incredible. Instead of juggling multiple apps, banking apps, and whatever other budgeting apps you're using, you can get it all in just one place to check your finances, track your spending, and even track your long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, welcome back. It's the Tuesday edition of Locked On Penguins. I'm Patrick Damp, alongside, as always, the one and only Hunter Hodes. And the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, they made a trio of signings on Monday, landing 3 collegiate free agents. And I am just going to apologize in advance for this first player, because I am probably going to butcher this name, but they have signed David Brzali, Aaron Huglin, and Zach Erdahl, 3 pretty solid players out of the NCAA. They have defensemen, Brzali, and forwards, Huglin and Erdahl. They are all on AHL deals. Brzali and Huglin, 2-year deals with the Baby Penguins on AHL contracts for the 25-26, 26-27 season. And Brazzali has also signed an amateur tryout agreement with the Penguins. He will join them immediately. And Erdal's contract is a 1-year deal for the 25-26 season. And this is actually something Kelsey Surmats and I talked about on an episode last week. With where the Penguins want to go, with where they are as a franchise, this is one of the resources that they are going to have to take full advantage of for a couple of reasons. One, you can't rely solely on draft picks, trades, and signings, but also you look at where this franchise is and where it's going, it can be an attractive destination to collegiate free agents. And we're not talking about the guys who have already been drafted, their rights are owned, they're already in systems and they are on development tracks with other organizations. But if you're a guy who just got missed, or a guy who didn't get drafted one season and then had a breakout year following that draft, there's an opportunity to get to the NHL in this organization right now, because we're at as good as job as Kyle Dubas has done, we are still very much at the beginning of this team rebuilding its prospect pool. And that means there's going to be a lot of opportunity for these guys to not only get into the lineup right away at the American Hockey League level, but maybe make the jump into the NHL.
Yeah, I mean, what this really is, you're throwing darts at a board, right? Trying to see what you have in these three players. They're going to help you here down the stretch into the playoffs. For Brazzali, 8 goals, 51 points in 144 games at the University of Maine. For Höglander, Pat, he was a former 4th-round pick of the Buffalo Sabres in the 2019 NHL draft. He had 73 points for the University of Minnesota in 150 games throughout his collegiate career. So you're taking chances on these type of players. You're going to plug them into your lineup. There's going to be a little bit of a rotation, right? Wilkes-Barre's regular season's almost over. They're going to make the playoffs. They have quite a bit of forward depth, even without McGroarty and Koivunen in the lineup. And I do also think, Pat, that is at least a small reason why you're making those moves, because McGroarty and Koivunen are up here for now. And this gives these players opportunities, the forwards at least, to especially get in the lineup a little bit, get their feet wet, see what they can do. And then, we'll have to see what happens when McGroarty and Koivunen get sent back down, because they're going to be in the AHL playoffs for Wilkes-Barre, expectedly so, just because they've been two of Wilkes-Barre's best players this year. For Brazzali, we'll have to see. Wilkes-Barre is pretty deep defensively this year. Harrison Brunick is also, I think he's looked pretty fine so far during his short stint in Wilkes-Barre with his first time going up against professional players. So I'll be curious to see how that goes. And, this would be as good of a time as any to get these players in a game, because their next game, Pat, this Friday against the Hershey Bears. And that is a huge game to end the regular season right now.
Yeah, this is a crucial time, even though that they are solidly in the Calder Cup playoffs. But you've kind of seen it since McGroarty and Koivunen have come up. Those two really were, in a way, the straw that stirred the drink for the Baby Penguins, because they've struggled a little bit since those guys went up. So it shows you how valuable they were to the Baby Penguins in their success. That's not to say that without those two, they're a bunch of bums and that's all that was there. But you take away two of what is probably their best players, and suddenly things get a little bit tougher. So now having those safety nets and having these guys who had solid NCAA careers could really be a big difference for this organization. But at the same time, I keep bringing this up, and it's a drum that I'm going to continue to hit for as long as I can, as long as it remains true. But you can really tell. And again, I know that Pittsburghers hate me saying this, but Kyle Dubas very much went to the Bill Belichick school of asset management. You look at the way that he built those Patriots dynasties, and yeah, it was on the backs of obviously Tom Brady and a bunch of very talented wide receivers, but he wasn't making one pick in the first round or one pick in the second round. He was making 2 to 3 picks in the third round, 2 to 3 picks in the fourth round, signing cast-offs. And in the modern day professional sports world, especially in leagues like the NFL and the NHL, it's going to be a lot easier to give yourself a bunch of lottery tickets than buying one ticket for the Powerball and hoping that you win in this metaphor. So I like the fact that the Penguins and Kyle Dubas are doing this rather than putting all of their stock in, oh, we got a good first round pick. It's going to be in the top 10 and that's going to be our ticket to success. It's, yeah, maybe we'll get a good pick in the first round, but then we're going to have 2 picks in the second, 3 picks in the third, and we're going to have 4 or 5 college free agents that we signed and a bunch of guys who fell out of favor with their NHL club, because it's going to be a lot easier for 2 to 3 of those guys to hit when you have 10 to 15 to pick from rather than one hitting out of 5 to 6 players.
Right, 100%. That's why you've seen them really stack the cupboard here. And remember, people, they're not going to use all these picks. They're going to use some of them, especially their main first round pick. That's going to be a top 10 pick. Potentially, if they get a little lottery luck, they could be a top 5 pick. We'll have to see on that. And then there's a chance that the Rangers give them that other pick, it could be as high as in the top 10, or if not number 11, because the Rangers are playing so poorly right now. They could also look to move that pick. But even after that, they have plenty of second round picks, plenty of third round picks. But you can also use some of those picks to go and get younger NHL players. And he even said this during his trade deadline press conference, that will help you right now. And I do think, again, for free agency this summer, I think they're going to be a bit quiet again, unless they do an offer sheet and give up their own third round pick or something like that. But I think the trade market is where I think if he gets aggressive and he wants to make a bunch of moves, I think that is where he will do it, because he will have the picks to do it. They're not going to use all those picks. This is why you also accumulate them. But he is still going to use a good chunk of them, and rightfully so, because, even in second, third round picks, a lot of those are also, dart throws. If you can hit on at least a couple of them, that also will go, again, such a long way for this rebuild on the fly.
Absolutely. And we'll cut this middle segment a little bit short because that is a good place to leave it for our final segment. We're going to talk about a couple of milestones and highlights from this season, as well as talk about what all that could mean for this franchise moving forward over the next couple of seasons. So we will do that when we come back right after this. So stick with us, but we've got to tell you about today's final sponsor, and that is Indeed. You just realized your business needs to hire someone yesterday. So how can you find amazing candidates fast? That's easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored job post puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. I have said it when I've read this ad before. While I have never had to use Indeed as someone looking to hire, I have used it as someone looking for a job. And if there's a better place than Indeed to find a job, I haven't found it yet. It got me connected with my current employer, as well as talked me into a bunch of interviews with potential employers. It's a fantastic site if you're looking for a job, and it's a fantastic site if you're looking to hire. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this very podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, all you need is Indeed. All right, welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Penguins. I'm Patrick Damp alongside Hunter Hodes. And yes, it stinks for the third straight year. The Pittsburgh Penguins will not qualify for the Stanley Cup playoffs, but there were a lot of highlights in this season. We obviously spent a large portion of this season tracking Sidney Crosby's quest to set the points per game record, which he did, but there were also some others that I want to start with, and we'll begin with the guy who has become the ultimate Penguin, and that is Brian Rust. Over the weekend, scores his 200th career goal. He has already reached a career high in points with 59, and he is 1 goal away from reaching his career high in goals at 29, and obviously 2 away from hitting that 30-goal plateau, and 3 assists away from tying his career high of 34. Hunter, I know that over the next couple of years, it's going to be very enticing to try to move some of these big names, these cornerstones. And this might not be the most popular thing I say, but I don't think you ever move Brian Rust. Unless Brian Rust comes to you and says, I want out, I think Brian Rust remains a Penguin until he wants to either not be one or retire.
Or until his contract is up, honestly. But I would agree with you on that. I think if you're looking for two players that or veterans, Pat, that could move this summer, it's two that we've talked about a lot, especially during the trade deadline. Rickard Rakell, who is still, I think, going to have more interest than some others think. He just tied his career high in goals with 34. He's one away from setting a new career high with 35. I say he does it with 1 goal in his last 4 games. He has been very consistent throughout the season. And then, of course, as we just discussed, Erik Karlsson. I think there is at least a decent chance that one, if not both of those players, gets moved. And, there's a lot of talk about, tanking for Gavin McKenna this next year draft just because how much of a freak he is. I don't think they'll go full blown towards that. I think the way they would tank for him is something that you've seen this year, Pat, if they decide to do that, where they're quiet during free agency and say maybe they're not as aggressive on the trade market as I think they will personally. And they just kind of make some little moves to try and maybe set themselves up to be really aggressive in 26, 27. I could see them kind of, I guess, tanking that way, if you want to call it. But they're not, I don't think, going to intentionally tank for Gavin McKenna as long as Sidney Crosby is on the roster for next season, as along with Evgeny Malkin. I don't think they're going to strip it down that far. They easily could if they want to. Don't get me wrong. They easily could be like, you know what, trading those two that I mentioned. You know what, Brian Russ, your no move clause is up this summer. We're going to move you to, because remember, Pat, his full no move is up this year. Like, that's a pretty big deal about this. So, and they could be like, you know what, we're going to move you to, see ya. We'll move other veterans as well. Like, they really could if they wanted to do that. I don't expect them to really tear it down to the studs and then just put a roster out there like you've seen Chicago do, especially for someone like Connor Bedard and all that stuff. So for me, I don't really see them stripping this thing down to the studs. And, Kyle Dubas has kind of confirmed that, even though, again, he's, rebuilding on the fly, he can move a good veteran or two this summer. I still don't think he's going to go full blown like what the Sharks just did for Macklin Celebrini or what the Blackhawks did for Bedard, for example.
For sure. The only way I see them doing that next season is if it becomes a complete disaster after the first month and a half, where it just looks like this team does not have it. And then you can just go, you know what? We've got our picks for this year. We've got a good, solid pipeline, especially after the draft this coming summer. And if it looks like this team is just fully cooked, then I can see him doing that. But I look at the way Sidney Crosby has played this year. I look at the way Brian Rust has played this year. If they don't find a good enough deal for him over the summer with the way Rickard Rakell has played, and then you mix in Ville Koivunen, you mix in Rutger McGrory, you mix in Tristan Brose, Harrison Brunick, Owen Pickering, and a couple other guys who look like they're ready to, if not right away next year, but some point into next year are ready to make a difference. You have the makings of a team I could see that gets a little bit better next year. Now, I don't want to artificially inflate anyone's expectations. I'm not saying they're going to turn into the Capitals next year and go on a marvelous run and look.
I don't think that's in the cards either. No.
But when you look at how well they've developed some of these younger guys, Crosby, barring something disastrous, I think is going to be right in the mix for 80 to 90 points again next year. If they hold on to Rickard Rakell, I don't see him dropping fully off of a cliff. Might not be career high, but 25, 30 goals, definitely in the cards. And there's a couple other guys that I want to mention here in this segment. Blake Lizotte, in many less games, has already matched his career high in goals with 11. And some of that was a hot start, but you've got a guy in your bottom 6 who can get double-digit goals. You've got a guy who's on the injured list right now, but tailed off a little bit over the past month or so, but showed a lot of promise in Philip Tomasino, who is already with 10 goals. That's a tie of a career high. And you mix a lot of this together, and I'm starting to see the makings of a team that could put themselves back in the conversation for getting into the playoffs. And if you can figure out what to do in net with one of Jari Nedeljkovic, and you can see Blomqvist or Murashov take the next step, I could see a world where Dubas is active in the trade market this summer, and this team is right back in the conversation to be in the playoffs in 26.
Well, the East is just awful. So that's also your silver lining there outside of a few teams. The Eastern Conference is absolutely awful going into next year, I think, still. So you do have that, but you also do have to weigh, like, is it worth it, getting, say, to the playoffs next year versus, maybe the year after, which right now, Pat, is the final year of his contract, when you're going to have an even more boatload of cap space. Yeah, I know Evgeny Malkin is a UFA after next season, but you will have a lot of needs. You will have a lot of money to spend. They're good. That's the year I think they'll be way more aggressive in free agency than the trade market. I think this year you'll probably see them more aggressive in the trade market just to maybe fill in a couple holes, especially, the top pairing left-handed defenseman. I think not enough people are discussing how much that of a need that is for next season. If it were up to me, I don't think I'd bring any of these guys on the left side back for next season, outside of calling up Owen Pickering. He deserves a spot. I think he's ready. Outside of that, you can move on from basically every single one of these guys on the left side. Maybe you can have Ryan Shea as a number 7, but they need to remake that entire left side. The right side, Erik Karlsson, if you move him, you need to bring in someone that can drive offense. Chris Letang, he can't handle top pairing minutes anymore. I like Connor Timmins on a third pairing rule, but again, man, I don't think enough people are talking about how much the defense needs to be remodeled for next season. It's a lot of work. I don't know if you're going to be able to get all of it done over the offseason, but again, this is why you have a plan in place and why I think they're really targeting the 26-7 season as the year where, okay, now we're really going to start potentially turning this into a contender. Maybe not that year, but 27, 28. But I think that's the start when they get really, and I mean really aggressive, but they'll also mobilize a little bit this summer with some trades and all that. So again, we'll have to see. We still have a few months to go until free agency starts.
Right. And you kind of made my point better than I could have there. I don't see Dubas being overly aggressive in free agency. One, because like you said, it's not a phenomenal class this summer. And I'm also skeptical that a lot of the big names that are slated for UFA this summer aren't going to make it there.
I know they're going to be connected to Mitch Marner people, and it would be fun. I do not see him signing here. I'm sorry.
I think it's 1 year early. If he was a UFA next summer, I could absolutely see them doing it.
Yes.
But since it's this summer, I'm extremely skeptical he even makes it to July 1. I think Toronto's going to find a way to lock him up, especially if they find a way to go to the second or even third round of the playoffs, because that kind of feels like that's the vibe around him is, yeah, we love you, you're great, but you got to earn your keep in the postseason before we make a decision. So we'll see what happens there. But I do think there could be an offer sheet or two. I do think there's going to be a good amount of trades. And I think it's a chance where you can kind of have found money to a little bit of an extent, because they're still going to have a ton of draft picks. They're going to trade a few away, but they're not going to trade all of them away. You still got a good few prospects, and you can give this team a little bit of a facelift via the trade market in the offseason. And you're not going to make them a Stanley Cup contender, but back to the playoffs, I think it's absolutely possible. But that will do it for today's episode of Locked On Penguins. Hunter and I will be back with a new episode for you on Wednesday. We will recap this Penguins and Blackhawks game, and it's Wednesday, which means Warrior Helmet Wednesday. We'll give out our MVP of the week and talk about anything else that might happen between now and then. But for Hunter Hodes, I'm Patrick Damp. Thank you as always for tuning in, and we will be back on Wednesday.